Jake Morrison stood in the grand hall of the Galactic Council and tried not to show his fear. The hall was enormous, with walls made of crystal that reached up so high he could barely see the ceiling. Creatures from 100 different worlds sat in the seats that circled the room. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like they were made of living metal. Jake had been a diplomat for 15 years, but this moment was different from anything he had ever experienced. Emperor Valthor sat on his throne at the center of the room. He was huge, almost 3 meters tall, with silver skin that seemed to glow under the lights. He had 3 eyes that moved independently, watching everything at once. The Kryn were the most powerful species in the known galaxy, and Valthor ruled them all with absolute authority. Jake had spent 6 months negotiating a peace treaty between the Kryn Empire and the outer colonies. It had been difficult work, full of late nights and careful words. He thought he had done well. The treaty was signed, and both sides seemed satisfied. He expected a simple thank you, maybe a medal, and then he would go home to Earth. He was wrong. Commander Jake Morrison of Earth, Emperor Valthor said, his voice deep and powerful. You have served well in bringing peace to the outer regions. Your work has prevented a war that would have cost millions of lives. Jake bowed respectfully. Thank you, Your Majesty. I was honored to serve. For your service, the Emperor continued, I wish to grant you a reward worthy of your achievement. Jake felt a small sense of relief. A reward was good. Maybe some kind of trading rights for Earth or a technology exchange. Those things would make his superiors happy. I grant you the hand of my daughter, Princess Liara, in marriage. The room went silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then the laughter started. It began with a chittering sound from the insect-like delegates from Xanthus Prime. Then came the deep, rumbling laughter of the rock creatures from Granite Home. Within moments, the entire council chamber was filled with the sounds of 100 different species laughing. Some wheezed, some roared, some made sounds Jake could not even identify, but they were all laughing at him. Jake stood frozen. His mind raced through everything he knew about galactic politics and Kryn culture. This was not an honor. This was an insult. A public humiliation designed to put humanity in its place. Ambassador Claire Watson stood beside him. She was his superior in the Terran Diplomatic Corps, a sharp woman who had taught Jake most of what he knew about dealing with alien species. She leaned close and whispered urgently in his ear. Refuse it, she said quietly. Do it diplomatically, but refuse. This is mockery, not honor. The Emperor is insulting both you and all of humanity. Jake looked up at the throne. Princess Liara stood beside her father. She was tall and slim, with the same silver skin as the Emperor, but unlike other Kryn royalty he had seen, she had no warrior markings on her arms or face. The Kryn were a warrior culture, and those markings were signs of honor and strength. Without them, she was considered defective by her own people. Liara's face showed no emotion, but Jake could see something in her eyes. Was it shame, anger, resignation? He could not quite tell. Jake knew the stories about Princess Liara. Everyone in the diplomatic community did. She was the Emperor's only daughter among 17 sons. She had been born without the warrior markings, which the Kryn considered a terrible flaw. Worse, she had shown an interest in books and learning instead of combat and conquest. In a culture that valued strength above all else, she was seen as weak and worthless. The Emperor had tried to marry her off several times before. Each time, the proposed husband had found a way to refuse without causing offense. She was 28 years old in Earth years, far past the normal marriage age for Kryn royalty. She had become a joke among the noble families, the unwanted princess that no one wanted to claim. And now the Emperor was giving her to Jake, not as an honor, but as a way to insult him. The message was clear. You are worth no more than my defective daughter. You are both worthless in my eyes. The laughter continued to echo through the hall. Jake saw some of the other human diplomats in the room. They looked embarrassed and angry. This would be reported back to Earth. His career was probably over. He would be remembered as the diplomat who became a joke across the entire galaxy. Jake also knew something else.
He knew galactic law.
Refusing a royal gift, especially a gift as significant as a marriage proposal, was considered a grave insult. It was one of the few things that could turn a peaceful relationship into an enemy relationship overnight. If he refused, he would not just be insulting the Emperor. He would be giving the Kryn Empire a legal reason to consider Earth an enemy. Earth could not afford that. Humanity was still new to galactic politics. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. They were small and weak compared to the great empires that controlled the galaxy. Making an enemy of the Kryn would be disastrous. Claire was right that this was an insult. But she was wrong that he could refuse. Jake looked at Liara again. She was watching him with those intelligent eyes. In that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. "I accept with gratitude, Your Majesty," Jake said clearly, his voice carrying through the hall. The laughter got louder. Even Emperor Valthor seemed surprised, though he quickly hid it behind a cruel smile. He had expected Jake to refuse, to squirm, to try to find some diplomatic way out. The fact that Jake had accepted made the joke even better in his eyes. "Excellent," the Emperor said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "Then let the bonding ceremony be prepared. You will be wed according to Kryn tradition within the month." The council session ended soon after. Jake was escorted through the crystal corridors of the Imperial Palace by silent guards. Liara walked beside him, but she said nothing. Her face remained an unreadable mask. They reached a set of quarters that would serve as their temporary home. The guards left them alone, closing the heavy doors behind them. Only then did Liara speak. "You are either the bravest human I have ever met or the most foolish," she said. Her voice was musical, beautiful despite the bitterness in her words. "My father just made you a joke across the entire galaxy. Every species in the council will now see you as weak. They will see all humans as weak." Jake turned to face her. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe your father just made the biggest mistake of his life." Liara's eyes widened slightly. It was the first real emotion he had seen on her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean that your father thinks he insulted me," Jake said. "He thinks he put me in my place. But what he actually did was give me something very valuable." "What could possibly be valuable about this situation?" Liara asked. "You," Jake said simply. "He gave me you, and I do not think you are the joke he believes you are." Liara stared at him for a long moment. "You know nothing about me. I know you were born without warrior markings, and your people see that as a flaw," Jake said. "I know you prefer books to battles. I know your father and brothers consider you worthless." He paused. "I also know that in human culture those things would make you valuable, not worthless. Intelligence matters more than strength. Wisdom matters more than violence. This is not human culture," Liara said coldly. "This is the Kryn Empire." "For now," Jake said. Liara studied him carefully. "You are planning something." "I am thinking about possibilities," Jake corrected. "Your father gave you to me as an insult, but insults can be turned into advantages if you are smart enough." "And you think you are smart enough?" "I think we might be smart enough," Jake said. Together. Liara walked to the window and looked out at the city below. The capital of the Kryn Empire spread out before them, full of towers and ships and millions of beings. "My father has 17 sons," she said quietly. "All of them are warriors. All of them are competing to inherit his throne. Even if I wanted to help you with whatever plan you are forming, it would be impossible. I am nothing in this empire." "That is where you are wrong," Jake said. "You are married to me now. That changes things. It changes nothing. It changes everything," Jake insisted. "I need to learn about Kryn law, specifically the laws about succession and inheritance." Liara turned to look at him. "Why?" Jake smiled. "Because I am tired of being laughed at. And I think you are too." For the first time, Liara smiled back. It was small, barely visible, but it was there. "You really are foolish," she said. But there was something new in her voice. It might have been hope. The first 3 weeks after the wedding ceremony were difficult. Liara spent most of her time in her private chambers, reading and avoiding Jake. He did not push her. Instead, he threw himself into his work as a diplomat, attending meetings and trying to maintain the relationships he had built. But everything had changed. The other diplomats treated him differently now. In meetings, when Jake spoke, the alien representatives would exchange glances and barely hide their smiles. His opinions, which had been respected before, were now dismissed or ignored completely. Jake had been working on a trade agreement with the Viridian Coalition for 8 months. It was nearly complete, just needing final signatures. But 3 days after his wedding, the Viridian ambassador sent a message canceling the entire deal. No explanation was given, but Jake knew the reason. They did not want to be associated with the human who had married the unwanted princess. The same thing happened with 2 other negotiations. Months of careful work disappeared overnight. Species that had been friendly before now avoided him in the corridors. Some were polite about it, making excuses. Others were more direct, telling him that their governments had no interest in dealing with someone who had become a joke. Claire tried to help. She met with Jake in a secure room where they could talk privately. "This has destroyed your career," she said bluntly. "I have been talking to Earth Command. They want to bring you home and assign someone else to this position." "No," Jake said. "Jake, be reasonable. You cannot work effectively here anymore. No one takes you seriously." "Not yet," Jake agreed. "But that will change," Claire sighed. "How?" "Every day you stay here it gets worse. The other diplomats are starting to avoid me too, just because I am associated with you. This is damaging all of humanity's relationships." "Give me 3 months," Jake said. "If things have not improved by then, I will request a transfer myself." Claire looked at him carefully. "What are you planning?" "I'm studying," Jake said. "Learning everything I can about the Kryn Empire." "Why?" "Because there is more going on here than anyone realizes," Jake said. "And I think I found something interesting." He had been spending his nights in the Imperial Library, a massive building filled with records and documents from thousands of years of Kryn history. The librarians were surprised to see a human there, but they allowed him access. Most of the records were not secret, just ignored because they were old and boring. Jake focused on the Codex of Succession, the ancient set of laws that governed how the Kryn Empire chose its rulers. He read through hundreds of pages of dense legal language, using a translation program to help him understand the complex terms. What he found was fascinating. The Kryn Empire was built on military conquest. The strongest warrior became emperor and his strongest son would inherit the throne. That was how most people understood it. But the actual law was more complicated. The Codex said that the heir must be chosen by trial of worthiness. Worthiness was defined in several ways. Military strength, yes, but also wisdom, the ability to form alliances and the capacity to bring peace and prosperity to the empire. The emperor's children would compete, and the one who proved most worthy would inherit. For centuries, military strength had been the only thing that mattered. But technically, according to the law, it was not the only path to the throne. Jake also discovered something else. Princess Liara, as the emperor's daughter, had just as much legal right to compete for succession as her brothers. The fact that she was female and unmarked did not actually disqualify her. It was tradition that made people think she could not inherit, not law. And now that she was married to a representative of humanity, a species that had recently proven itself in several conflicts, her position was stronger than anyone realized. Jake needed to talk to Liara. He found her in the garden one evening. She was sitting by a fountain, reading from a holographic display that floated in the air in front of her. "Your father's empire is built on conquest," Jake said without any greeting. Liara looked up, surprised. "Yes, everyone knows this. But it is maintained through the Codex of Succession," Jake continued. "I have been reading it, all of it. Every page." Liara's eyes narrowed with interest. "You have been studying our laws." "Your father has 17 sons," Jake said, sitting down across from her. "All of them are warriors. All of them are competing for his throne when he dies or steps down. But the Codex states that the heir must be chosen by trial of worthiness. And worthiness is not just defined by combat. It is also defined by alliance, wisdom, and the securing of peace." Liara finished, closing her display. "I know the law, Commander. I have read it more times than you have been alive. It does not matter. I am a daughter and I am unmarked. No one would accept me as heir. But you are married now," Jake pointed out, "to a representative of humanity, a species that just fought the Zarthic Confederation to a standstill, a species that the Council fears but will not admit they fear." Liara was quiet for a moment. "You want to claim the throne?" "I want to stop being a joke," Jake corrected. "And I think you do too. Your father gave you to me thinking it would humiliate us both. Let us prove him wrong." "You understand what you are suggesting?" Liara asked. "If we do this, if we actually try to compete for succession, it will not be a game. My brothers will try to kill you. Some of them are already looking for excuses. The Council will move against us. They will see us as a threat. And my father, if he realizes what we are doing, he will never forgive the insult. Then we need to be smart about it, Jake said. We cannot challenge them directly. We need to be subtle. We need to undermine them slowly, carefully, so they do not realize what is happening until it is too late. Liara studied him for a long moment. Jake could see her thinking, calculating. Why should I trust you? She finally asked. You are human. This is not your world. You could leave at any time and go back to Earth. Why would you risk your life for this? Because I am tired of being dismissed, Jake said honestly. My entire career, I have had to work twice as hard as everyone else to get half the respect. Humanity is seen as weak, as newcomers who do not belong. I am tired of it. If we do this, if we succeed, we change everything, not just for us but for all humans. And if we fail, then we fail, Jake said. But at least we will have tried. Liara was silent again, thinking. Then she extended her hand in the human gesture Jake had taught her. Partners? Jake took her hand and shook it firmly. Partners. Over the next 2 weeks, they began to plan. Liara knew things about the Imperial family that no one else did. She had spent years being ignored, dismissed as unimportant. But that meant people talked freely around her. They shared secrets because they thought she did not matter. She knew that Prince Kaldor, the eldest son and the one most people expected to inherit, had been stealing from the Imperial treasury for years. He had taken millions of credits and hidden them in secret accounts, planning to use the money to buy support when the time came to claim the throne. She knew that Prince Vorath had been selling military intelligence to the Ashtar Collective, an enemy of the Empire. He thought he was being clever, building relationships he could use later. But it was treason, and if it was exposed, he would be executed. She knew that General Theron, the military commander who supported Prince Dravok, was deeply in debt to crime syndicates. He had made bad investments and needed money desperately. Liara knew dozens of secrets like these. She had kept them to herself because she had no power to use them, but now with Jake she did. Jake brought his own knowledge. He understood how to manipulate information, how to leak secrets in ways that could not be traced back to him. He knew how to approach people with offers that seemed beneficial, but served his purposes. He had spent years learning how to play political games, and the Kryn court was just another game played by different rules. They started with Prince Kaldor. Liara provided Jake with detailed information about the stolen money, including account numbers and transaction records. Jake carefully leaked this information to the Council of Accountancy, a bureaucratic organization so powerful that even the Emperor could not ignore their investigations. The Council of Accountancy was filled with careful, detail-oriented beings who loved rules and regulations. They took accusations of financial misconduct very seriously. Within days, they began an official investigation into Prince Kaldor's finances. Kaldor was forced to withdraw from court to answer their questions. The investigation would take months, maybe years. During that time, he could not actively compete for the throne. One rival was temporarily removed from the game. Next, they approached General Theron. Jake arranged a private meeting through careful intermediaries. When they met, Jake made his offer simple and direct. I know about your debts, Jake said. I know you owe money to very dangerous people. I can help you. Theron was a massive Kryn warrior, covered in scars and battle markings. He looked at Jake with suspicion. Why would you help me? Because I want something in return, Jake said. The Empire's military budget is bloated and inefficient. Contracts go to companies that pay bribes, not companies that provide the best equipment. I want to reform that system. You help me do it, and I will help you clear your debts. You are married to the unwanted princess, Theron said. You have no power. I have connections to Earth, Jake countered. Human military technology is 50. Liara led Jake to a private training room deep in the palace. The room was old, covered in dust, and clearly had not been used in years. Ancient weapons hung on the walls, and the floor was marked with scars from countless practice sessions. This was my mother's training room, Liara explained as she activated the lights. She died when I was young, but she was one of the greatest warriors the Empire had ever seen. My father sealed this room after her death. No one comes here anymore. Why are you bringing me here? Jake asked. Because you need every advantage you can get, Liara said. My mother developed a fighting style that was different from traditional Kryn combat. She combined speed with intelligence, using her opponent's strength against them. My father hated it. He said it was not honorable, not direct enough. But she won every fight she was in. Liara walked to a weapons rack and selected 2 practice blades. They were not sharp, but they were heavy and could cause serious injury if used carelessly. She tossed one to Jake. My mother taught me her style before she died, Liara continued. I have never had a chance to use it in real combat. My father forbade me from fighting, but I have practiced alone in this room for years, perfecting the techniques. Jake caught the blade and tested its weight. Can you really teach me enough in 3 days to face Dravok? No, Liara said honestly. 3 days is not enough time to make you a master. Dravok has been training for 30 years, but I can teach you enough to surprise him. Kryn warriors are strong and aggressive. They expect direct confrontation. My mother's style is about misdirection and patience. If you can make Dravok think you are fighting one way, then shift to another, you might have a chance. Might? A small chance, Liara admitted. But it is better than no chance at all. They trained for hours that first day. Liara was a harsh teacher, correcting every mistake and pushing Jake past the point of exhaustion. She taught him footwork first, showing him how to move efficiently, how to conserve energy while making his opponent waste theirs. Dravok will try to overwhelm you with aggression, Liara explained. He will come at you hard and fast, trying to end the fight quickly. You need to make him chase you. Tire him out. Make him angry so he makes mistakes. How do I make him angry? Jake asked, breathing hard. By surviving, Liara said with a slight smile. Every second you stay alive is an insult to him. He told the entire court he would kill you quickly. If you last more than a few minutes, he will start to panic. They trained through the night. Jake's muscles screamed in protest and his hands were blistered from gripping the practice blade. But he kept going. Claire tried to contact him several times, but he ignored the messages. Nothing else mattered right now except learning to survive. On the second day, Liara began teaching him offensive techniques. She showed him strikes that looked like they were aimed at one target, but could shift to another at the last second. She demonstrated feints and false openings that would trick an opponent into attacking at the wrong moment. My mother used to say that fighting is like conversation, Liara explained. You say something, your opponent responds. You listen to what they say with their body and you reply accordingly. Most Kryn warriors only know how to shout. They attack with all their strength over and over. But if you can whisper, if you can be subtle, you can confuse them. Jake was beginning to understand. It was not about being stronger than Dravok. That was impossible. It was about being smarter, more adaptable. It was about turning the fight into a chess game instead of a boxing match. They took a short break and Jake sat against the wall drinking water. His entire body ached. Why are you really doing this? Liara asked suddenly. I told you, Jake said. I'm tired of being a joke. That is part of it, Liara agreed. But there is something else. You could have refused my father's offer and dealt with the consequences. Earth is far away. The Kryn Empire could not really hurt you there. You could have gone home and lived a normal life. But you stayed, why? Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. Because I am tired of running, he finally said. My whole life I have been the person who avoids conflict, who finds the diplomatic solution, who compromises and makes everyone happy. But there comes a point where compromise is just another word for surrender. Your father insulted me. He insulted all of humanity. And I realized that if I just accepted it, if I went home quietly, then he would be right. We would be weak. We would be nothing. So this is about pride? Liara asked. This is about proving that humanity deserves respect, Jake said. We are small. We are new to the galaxy. But we are not weak. And I am going to prove it even if it kills me. Liara nodded slowly. I understand. I have spent my entire life being told I am worthless because I was born without markings. Because I prefer books to battles. My father looks at me and sees nothing but failure. My brothers see me as a joke. The entire empire sees me as the unwanted daughter. She paused. But I am not worthless. And I am tired of pretending that I am. Then let us prove them all wrong, Jake said. Together, they continued training. By the third day, Jake was moving differently. He was not as strong or as fast as a Kryn warrior, but he was learning to be unpredictable. Liara attacked him again and again, and slowly he began to counter her moves. Not every time, but often enough to give him hope. Remember, Liara said as they finished their final practice session, Dravok will try to intimidate you. He will show off his strength. He will make threats. Do not respond, stay calm. Let him think you are afraid. Then when the fight begins, show him that you are not. What if I am afraid? Jake asked. Then hide it, Liara said. Fear is natural, but showing fear is weakness. Dravok will use it against you. That evening, Claire finally cornered Jake in the corridor outside his quarters. I have been trying to reach you for 3 days, she said angrily. Do you have any idea what you have done? Earth Command is furious. You challenged a Kryn prince to a duel. If you die, it will cause a diplomatic incident. They want you to withdraw the challenge immediately. I cannot, Jake said. If I withdraw, I will look like a coward. That will be worse than dying. Jake, be reasonable, Claire pleaded. This is insane. You have been a diplomat for 15 years. You solve problems with words, not violence. You are not a fighter. Maybe it is time I learned to be, Jake said. Why are you doing this? Claire asked, her voice rising. What could possibly be worth dying for? Respect, Jake said simply. And the future of humanity in galactic politics. If I back down now, we will always be seen as weak. But if I fight, even if I lose, we will be seen as brave. Sometimes that matters more. Claire stared at him, then shook her head. I do not understand you anymore. You do not have to understand, Jake said. You just have to trust me. Claire left without another word. Jake entered his quarters and found Liara waiting for him. Are you ready? She asked. No, Jake admitted. But I will do it anyway. That is what bravery is, Liara said. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. She handed him a small data chip. I analyzed Dravok's previous fights. He has patterns, tendencies. He favors his right side because he injured his left knee years ago. It healed, but not perfectly. He always makes the same opening move, a diagonal strike from upper right to lower left. And when he gets frustrated, he drops his guard slightly after missing a strike. Jake took the chip and loaded it into his personal device. He studied the recordings, watching Dravok fight again and again. Liara was right. There were patterns, subtle but definitely there. One more thing, Liara said. She approached him and placed her hand on his chest over his heart. It was a Kryn gesture of deep trust and affection. You have given me something I have not had in years. Hope. Do not throw that away by dying tomorrow. I will do my best, Jake promised. That night, Jake barely slept. He kept replaying the training sessions in his mind, remembering every technique Liara had taught him. He knew the odds were against him. Dravok was bigger, stronger, faster, and far more experienced. But Jake had 2 advantages. He was smarter and he had something to prove. The morning of the duel arrived. Jake dressed in the light armor that was traditional for the rite of contest. It would not stop a direct strike from a plasma blade, but it might deflect a glancing blow. He attached his weapon to his belt and made his way to the arena of judgment. The arena was huge, carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light. Seats rose up in circles around the central fighting space, and they were packed with spectators. Representatives from dozens of species had come to watch. The Galactic Council had sent observers. Even Emperor Valthor himself was there, sitting on a raised throne with his sons beside him. Jake walked into the arena and looked up at the crowd. Thousands of beings stared down at him. Some were curious. Some were entertained. Most were expecting to see him die. Across the arena, Dravok entered. He was massive, nearly 2.5 meters tall, with silver skin covered in intricate warrior markings that glowed with blue light. He carried a plasma blade that hummed with energy. He looked at Jake and smiled, showing sharp teeth. Any last words, human? Dravok called out, his voice echoing through the arena. Jake drew his own blade and activated it. The weapon came to life with a sharp hiss. Yes, Jake said clearly. I am not here to kill you. I am here to prove. The fight became a dance of blade and blood. Dravok attacked with raw power, each strike capable of ending the fight instantly. Jake defended with technique and intelligence, using the methods Liara had taught him. He blocked when he had to, dodged when he could, and looked for openings. The crowd was no longer laughing. They watched in silence, shocked by what they were seeing. A human, a species known for diplomacy rather than combat, was holding his own against one of the Empire's most dangerous warriors. Jake could feel his arms getting tired. The plasma blade was heavy, and blocking Dravok's powerful strikes sent shocks through his entire body. His armor had been cut in several places, and he could feel warm blood running down his side from a wound he barely remembered receiving. But Dravok was hurting too. Jake had landed 3 more hits, all small cuts but enough to slow the prince down. More importantly, Dravok was getting frustrated. His attacks were becoming wild, less controlled. "Why will you not die?" Dravok roared, launching another series of strikes. Jake parried the first two, dodged the third, and countered with a strike aimed at Dravok's left knee, the one Liara had identified as weak. The blade connected and Dravok stumbled. Jake pressed his advantage. For the first time in the fight, he went on the offensive, attacking with a combination of strikes that Liara had drilled into him over and over. High-low, feint left, strike right. Dravok was forced backwards, defending instead of attacking. The prince recovered quickly, though. He roared and unleashed a powerful overhead strike that Jake barely blocked. The force of the blow drove Jake to one knee, and he felt something in his left arm pop. Pain shot through his shoulder. Dravok raised his blade for a finishing strike. Jake saw it coming and knew he could not block it. Not with his injured arm. So he did something unexpected. He dropped his blade entirely and rolled forward inside Dravok's reach and slammed his shoulder into the prince's injured knee. Dravok cried out and fell. Jake scrambled to retrieve his blade, his left arm hanging uselessly at his side. He grabbed the weapon with his right hand and pointed it at Dravok's throat as the prince struggled to rise. "Yield," Jake said, breathing hard. His voice was firm despite his exhaustion. Dravok stared up at him, fury and something else in his eyes. Pride, maybe, or respect. The arena was completely silent. Everyone waited to see what would happen. "I yield," Dravok finally said. The crowd erupted. Some were cheering. Some were shouting in anger. Some simply could not believe what they had witnessed. Jake lowered his blade and offered his good hand to Dravok. The prince stared at the offered hand for a moment, then took it. Jake helped him to his feet, and Dravok clasped his arm in the traditional Kryn warrior's acknowledgement of respect. "You fight with honor," Dravok said quietly, so only Jake could hear. "I underestimated you. That was my mistake." "You fought well," Jake replied. "But I had a good teacher." Dravok glanced up at the royal box where Liara sat. Understanding crossed his face. "My sister taught you." "Yes," Dravok nodded slowly. "Then perhaps she is not as worthless as we all believed." He raised his voice so the arena could hear. "I acknowledge my defeat. According to the rite of contest, I will honor my pledge to support Commander Morrison." The crowd's noise grew louder. Some species were outraged. Others were impressed. The human had not just survived, he had won. Jake walked out of the arena, his vision starting to blur from pain and exhaustion. Medical personnel rushed to him, scanning his injuries. His left arm was dislocated. He had 3 broken ribs and he had lost a significant amount of blood from various cuts. But he was alive. Liara met him outside the medical bay. She looked at his injuries and her face tightened with concern. "You are a fool," she said, but her voice was gentle. "A living fool," Jake replied with a weak smile. "Barely," she said. She touched his cheek carefully. "But a brave one." The medical staff took Jake inside to treat his injuries. They were efficient, using advanced technology that sealed wounds and realigned bones within minutes. The pain was intense during the treatment, but afterwards Jake felt much better. His arm was in a support brace and his ribs were wrapped, but he could move. Claire arrived while he was still in recovery. "That was the most reckless, stupid, dangerous thing I have ever seen," she said. Then she smiled. "It was also the most impressive. Earth Command is confused, the Galactic Council is in an uproar, and you just became famous across half the galaxy." "Famous in a good way or a bad way?" Jake asked. "Both," Claire admitted. "Some species think you are a hero. Others think you are a threat. But no one is laughing anymore." "Good," Jake said. That was the point. Emperor Valthor summoned Jake and Liara to the throne room the next day. Jake's injuries still hurt, but he could walk and stand without assistance. He and Liara entered the grand hall together. The Emperor sat on his throne, looking down at them with an unreadable expression. His 17 sons stood around him, including Dravok. The Galactic Council representatives were there as well, watching with interest. "Commander Morrison," the Emperor said, "you have surprised me twice now. First, you accepted my daughter as your wife when I expected you to refuse. Second, you defeated one of my sons in formal combat when everyone expected you to die." "I am full of surprises, Your Majesty," Jake said. "So it seems," Valthor said. "Tell me, what do you want?" "You have proven yourself brave. You have gained the support of Prince Dravok through the rite of contest. You have made yourself known across the galaxy, but bravery alone does not make you worthy of anything more than a quick death." "I want to change the Empire," Jake said clearly. The throne room went silent. Several of the princes looked angry. Even Dravok seemed surprised by Jake's boldness. Change it how? The Emperor asked, his voice dangerous. Your empire is the most powerful in the galaxy, Jake said, but it is also the most stagnant. You conquer new worlds, but you cannot hold them without constant military presence. Your subject species rebel constantly. Your economy is entirely dependent on taking resources from others, and you are running out of territory to conquer. You dare to criticize the Kryn Empire, Prince Vorath snarled. I dare to speak truth, Jake replied. Humanity controls 50 systems. The Kryn Empire controls 200, but our economy is 3 times larger than yours because we trade instead of conquer. We form alliances instead of subjugating. We build instead of taking. We are warriors, Emperor Valthor said coldly. That is our nature. That is our strength. Your strength is also your weakness, Jake said. Every species in the galaxy fears you, but no one truly respects you. They obey because they must, not because they want to. The moment you show weakness, they will all rebel at once. Your empire will collapse. And you think you can prevent this? The Emperor asked. I think the empire needs to change or it will die, Jake said. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. The galaxy is changing.
New alliances are forming.
Technology is advancing. Military conquest is becoming more expensive and less effective. If the Kryn Empire does not adapt, it will be left behind. And what would you have us do? Valthor asked. Become weak like humanity? Abandon our traditions? Not weak, Liara said, speaking for the first time. Stronger, smarter. Father, you gave me to Commander Morrison as an insult. You thought we were both worthless. But in these past months, we have been working. Building relationships. Forming alliances. We have done what none of your sons have managed to do. What alliances? Prince Kaldor demanded. Liara activated a holographic display that appeared in the center of the throne room. It showed documents, agreements, and communications. The Viridian Coalition has agreed to preliminary trade talks, she said. The Ashtar Collective has opened diplomatic channels for the first time in 20 years. The Free Worlds Assembly has expressed interest in a mutual defense pact. And the Terran Alliance is willing to share advanced technology in exchange for access to Kryn manufacturing capabilities. The throne room erupted in shocked voices. Princes shouted questions. Council representatives leaned forward to study the documents. Even Emperor Valthor looked surprised. You did this? He asked. Without my permission? We did this to prove a point, Jake said. That there is another path forward. Your sons compete for your throne by conquering planets and killing enemies. But Princess Liara and I have brought you something more valuable. We have brought you the possibility of peace with prosperity, of strength through alliance instead of fear. This is treason, Prince Vorath said. They have negotiated with foreign powers without imperial authority. Actually, we have not, Liara said calmly. All of these are preliminary discussions only. Nothing has been signed. Nothing is binding. We simply opened conversations to show what is possible. Emperor Valthor stood from his throne. He walked down the steps and approached Jake and Liara. Jake stood his ground, meeting the Emperor's gaze. You are either the bravest being I have ever met, or the most foolish, Valthor said. I gave you my daughter expecting you to fail. I expected you to run back to Earth in shame. Instead, you have challenged my son, won the respect of my warriors, and brought me trade agreements I did not ask for. I apologize if I have overstepped, Your Majesty, Jake said carefully, but I saw an opportunity and took it. Valthor stared at him for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he smiled. It was not a cruel smile this time, but something genuine. You have proven yours. The first year was the hardest. Jake and Liara faced resistance at every turn. The princes who had been passed over for succession worked to undermine them. Council members who profited from the old system of conquest tried to block their reforms. Even some of the subject species were suspicious, believing that any change from the Kryn Empire was a trick. But Jake and Liara kept working. They started small, focusing on economic reforms that would benefit everyone. They renegotiated mining contracts to give local populations a fair share of profits. They opened trade routes that had been closed for decades. They brought in human technology companies to modernize Kryn manufacturing. The results were slow at first, but they were real. Worlds that had been on the verge of rebellion began to prosper. Tax revenues increased as trade expanded. The military budget could be reduced slightly without weakening defenses because they no longer needed to station troops everywhere to prevent uprisings. General Theron, proved to be a valuable ally. With access to human military technology, he was able to upgrade the Kryn fleet at a fraction of the previous cost. The ships were more efficient, more powerful, and cheaper to maintain. He presented these improvements to Emperor Valthor, making himself look good while also supporting Jake and Liara's approach. Prince Dravok kept his word as well. He did not openly support Jake and Liara in council meetings, but he did not oppose them either. More importantly, he used his influence with other military commanders to prevent active sabotage. When some of the more aggressive princes tried to start conflicts that would discredit the diplomatic approach, Dravok quietly intervened to stop them. Claire remained skeptical but supportive. Earth Command was nervous about how involved Jake had become in Kryn politics, but they could not deny the results. Human companies were making huge profits from the new trade agreements. Earth's influence in the galaxy had grown significantly, and humanity was no longer seen as weak newcomers but as important players in galactic affairs. "You are playing a dangerous game," Claire warned Jake during one of their meetings. "If you succeed, humanity becomes a major power. If you fail, we might end up at war with the Kryn Empire." "I am not going to fail," Jake said confidently. "Everyone says that," Claire replied, "right up until they fail." But Jake did not fail. By the end of the second year, the economic changes were producing obvious benefits. The Empire's gross product had increased by 15%. Rebellion activity had dropped by 40%. Several independent species had voluntarily joined the Empire as equal partners, rather than conquered subjects. Emperor Valthor watched all of this with interest. He said little publicly, but he noticed everything. He saw how his daughter, the one he had dismissed as worthless, had become a skilled negotiator and administrator. He saw how the human he had given her to as an insult had become one of the most influential figures in the Empire. The other princes saw it too. Some of them began to adapt, trying to learn from Jake and Liara's methods. Prince Kaldor, after finally clearing his name with the Council of Accountancy, approached Jake with a proposal. "I want to learn your ways," Kaldor said bluntly. "I have spent my life training as a warrior, but I see now that the future requires different skills. Teach me diplomacy." Jake was surprised but agreed. Kaldor proved to be a quick student. He used his military background to establish security partnerships with species that feared Kryn aggression. He negotiated treaties that guaranteed peace in exchange for trade benefits. Within 6 months, he had become one of Jake and Liara's strongest supporters. Not all the princes were willing to adapt. Prince Vorath, the one who had been selling military intelligence, became increasingly desperate. His illegal activities were starting to catch up with him, and he knew that if Jake and Liara succeeded completely, he would be exposed and executed. He began plotting against them. He contacted enemies of the Empire, offering them information about Kryn defenses. He tried to arrange accidents and assassinations. But Jake and Liara had built a network of informants and allies who warned them of each attempt. The final confrontation with Vorath came in the 3rd year. He tried to poison Jake during a state dinner, using a substance that was supposed to be undetectable. But Liara had anticipated the attempt and had Jake's food tested by human medical equipment that could identify compounds Kryn scanners missed. When the poison was discovered, Vorath was arrested. The evidence of his treasonous activities was presented to Emperor Valthor and the Galactic Council. The trial was swift and the verdict was unanimous. Vorath was executed according to Kryn law. His death sent a message to the other princes. Jake and Liara were not weak. They were not naive. They could be just as ruthless as any Kryn warrior when necessary, but they preferred to build rather than destroy. By the 4th year, the transformation of the Empire was undeniable. The economy had doubled in size. New technologies were being developed through partnerships with human and other alien scientists. Art and culture were flourishing as resources previously devoted to military expansion were redirected to education and development. The Galactic Council, which had once laughed at Jake, now treated him as an equal. Representatives from dozens of species sought meetings with him and Liara, hoping to establish their own partnerships with the changing Kryn Empire. Claire visited the Empire for an official state function. She found Jake and Liara in their office reviewing reports and planning their next initiatives. "You have done the impossible," Claire said, looking around at the modern, efficient workspace. "You have changed an empire that was the same for 10,000 years. We are not done yet, Jake said. We still have one more year to prove ourselves. I think you already have, Claire replied. But I know you will not stop until the time is up. We cannot, Liara added. There are still princes who oppose us. Still council members who want to return to the old ways. If we show any weakness now, they will tear down everything we have built. She was right. Prince Theric, the youngest of the Emperor's sons, had been building his own coalition. He argued that the Empire was losing its warrior spirit, becoming soft under human influence. He had support among the more traditional military commanders and some of the conquered species who paradoxically preferred the brutal but predictable old system to the uncertain new one. Theric challenged Jake to another formal duel in the final months of the 5th year, but this time Jake refused. I already proved I can fight, Jake said publicly when the challenge was issued. Now I will prove I can think. Prince Theric, I challenge you to a different kind of contest, a competition of governance. You take one sector of the Empire and govern it your way, with military rule and traditional methods. I will take an equivalent sector and govern it my way, with diplomacy and economic development. In 1 year, we will see which sector is more prosperous, more peaceful, and more loyal to the Empire. Theric was trapped. If he refused, he would look like a coward. If he accepted, he would have to prove that his methods actually worked better. He accepted. Emperor Valthor approved the competition. 2 sectors of roughly equal size and development were chosen. Theric took command of one, Jake and Liara took the other. The entire galaxy watched to see what would happen. Theric governed with iron discipline. He increased military presence, crushed any hint of dissent, and extracted maximum resources from the planets under his control. His sector was orderly and productive in the short term. Jake and Liara took the opposite approach. They reduced military presence, established local councils that gave planets more autonomy, and invested in infrastructure and education. Their sector was messy and complicated in the short term. But as the year progressed, the differences became clear. Theric's sector was productive but unhappy. Planets obeyed out of fear but looked for any opportunity to rebel. When a natural disaster struck one of his worlds, the population refused to cooperate with relief efforts because they did not trust the government. Jake and Liara's sector had problems too, but they were different. Planets argued and debated, sometimes loudly, but when the same kind of natural disaster struck one of their worlds, neighboring planets immediately sent aid without being asked. The local councils organized relief efforts more efficiently than any military operation could have. By the end of the year, the results were measured and compared. Theric's sector had slightly higher resource extraction but also higher military costs, lower citizen satisfaction, and increasing tensions. Jake and Liara's sector had lower resource extraction but much higher economic growth, very low military costs, and strong loyalty to the Empire. The Galactic Council reviewed the data and issued their judgment. Jake and Liara's approach was more sustainable and more beneficial to the Empire's long-term interests. Emperor Valthor called a final assembly. All of his sons, all of the council representatives, and delegates from across the Empire attended. Jake and Liara stood before the throne, waiting for the Emperor's decision. Valthor looked older than he had 5 years ago. The stress of watching his empire transform had taken its toll, but there was something else in his expression now, something that might have been pride. 5 years ago, I gave my daughter to a human diplomat as an insult, the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the chamber. I expected them to fail. I expected